time, I'll call the meeting of the Marshall City Council to order with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening, and of course a special welcome to Russell Batt, who in a few minutes will be sworn in as a council member. So, and actually that's where we're at on the agenda. So at this time, I'll ask our city clerk, Kyle Box, to come forward and administer the oath of office to all of the elected officials who were elected in the last election.
Correct. So if I could have the duly elected council members please stand. Raise your right hand and repeat the oath of office.
I, Russell Batt, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution and laws of the state of Minnesota and of the United States, and will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of council member of the city of Marshall, so help me God.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Join me in welcoming the new. Okay, we have an agenda before us. Are there any changes to the agenda that we have this evening? One change is that agenda item number 26, if the council is agreeable, we'll move that up to agenda item number 21. And that's because one of the individual representing that has a fire department meeting later this evening. So if there's no other changes, we'll operate under that agenda. We'll move then to agenda item number 4, which is consider the approval of the minutes of the council meeting, the special council meeting that was held on December 18th, as well as the regular council meeting that was also held on December 18th. So the council does have the minutes of both of those meetings. Are there any corrections?
Move approval. Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Steve to approve the minutes as they have been prepared. At this time, then we will move to a vote. So,
We'll reopen the voting. We'll reopen the voting to allow everyone to vote.
okay, and the motion does pass. So, maybe a little word of explanation for those that are viewing as well as those in attendance is the council is using a new software program for the meeting management, which means as we look at our agenda, as you look at it on the screen, that's all managed differently behind the scenes, and how we vote is different. So this there could be some awkward pauses sometimes during the meeting when we're trying to figure out how we should be running the software program. So with that, you'll bear with us. But we'll then move then to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 5. Agenda item number 5 is a public hearing. This would be a public hearing on a home property tax abatement request. We'll have the public hearing, and then following the public hearing, then we'll consider the resolution that would approve the property tax abatement. So with that, Sharon, are you?
I can. We will have our Economic Development Director, Tara Onken, actually present the request.
Okay.
This is a result of the home tax abatement policy that the council adopted last year. And this is our first home tax abatement policy. And I believe one of the first items prior to Tara presenting is to open the public hearing, or is it officially open?
So we'll
Okay,
open the
it is
public
open.
hearing. I'll ask Sharon Hanson to conduct the public hearing, and then we'll introduce the presentation on this, and then we'll open it up for any public comment. So.
Okay. I think what I'd like to do is just have Tara present the request.
So Tara Onken, Economic Development Director.
Good evening, everybody. This request came forward as a result of the single-family home tax abatement policy that the council had approved late last year. So the request that came forward meets all of the criteria that was in that abatement policy. The property is located at 1103 Slate Street with an estimated market value of $200,000. So the difference between the base estimated market value and the improvements is $165,000. So as you can see in your packets, underneath the fiscal impact, this is just preliminary estimates. The house hasn't been built yet or assessed yet, but based upon all of the information that we have right now, that approximate amount of assistance underneath the abatement policy would be about $1,800 over 2 years as the council set forth that policy.
Thank you, Tara. We'll open up for public comment as either from the council members or members of the audience as part of the public hearing.
Just one comment,
Greg?
Mr. Mayor, I'm glad to see that we're doing some activity on this. I think that's very positive. And I'm glad to see this going forward.
Any other input public as part of the public comment period? If not, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Motion by Steve, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. The motion does pass. So then we'll move then to the next item, which then is the resolution that would approve the home property tax abatement. Is there a motion?
I move the resolution.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Russ. Discussion?
Just a quick question. Does the abatement apply only to the city portion of the tax or the school district and county portion too?
It's just the city.
It would just apply to the city's portion of the taxes.
And that's per the policy that we passed a few meetings ago about the abatement, is that it's only addressed to the city portion for years.
Mr. Mayor, we could forward the application to the county for their consideration as well.
Other discussion on the motion?
The only reason I was asking that, the information provided here shows the proposed taxes, and it looked like it was the tax on the entire value, and I just wanted to make sure it was just the city portion.
It is on the entire value, but it's only for the city's portion. of
Right,
property tax.
but I was looking at the tax amount. It looked like it was tax, might have included
Oh.
the county and the city and the school district, and I just wanted to make sure it did not.
Any other discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote.
Try that again. Sorry.
Okay, so we'll vote again.
Mr. Mayor, if you could announce to close the voting, that would resolve some of that. If everyone's had a chance to vote.
So everyone had a chance to vote. So then we'll close the voting. And motion does pass. So then we'll move then to agenda item number 6. Agenda item number 6 is the Commerce Industrial Park addition. The public hearing will consider the approval of the preliminary plat as well as the resolution that would approve that. So approve the final plat. So we'll start with the public hearing, then we'll consider the resolutions on the preliminary and the final plat. So I'll call on Glenn Olson, Director of Public Works, to conduct this public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. If we could bring up the preliminary plat diagram. Okay, there. This is the original preliminary plat for the for this industrial park second edition. As you recall, these areas that are now designated as outlots for drainage and treatment purposes, both for this little corner, for this pond, and for the ones on the south end. If you can't see them, they're on the south end. Really need to be done so we can identify the buildable, constructible lots that exist. And we've only developed the roadway on the south side of the subdivision. That's Michigan Road all the way out to the connection with Trunk Highway 23. These dedicated roadways have not been installed, won't be installed until there's a reason to do so. So what that makes available is the entire area, even though it's platted, for, it makes it available for construction if need be. We would go through a process of vacating those areas if in fact we got a request to do so. But this is now the redeveloped areas that would be available for construction at the current time. Block 1, Lot 1, Block 2, Lot 1, Block 3, Lot 1. You can just follow all the way down. Those are the areas that are able to be developed. Now realistically, the areas that are developable tomorrow are the lots on either side of the new Michigan Road. Any of these other areas would have to have more improvements made to assess water, sewer, roadways, things like that. So we're going through this process. We will also then be bidding out rental agreements for the undeveloped portions of this subdivision, subject to our intent is to have a 5-year agreement with a farmer that would like to farm that area, and then we reserve the right to cancel any part at any time with certain notice, understanding that if we do cancel the rent on any given portion, that portion we would pay the farmer for his inputs. So, and we've done that in all of our other developable industrial areas. So we protect ourselves, but yet we protect the renter as well as far as the inputs that he has put into the property prior to sale. So this is the preliminary plat. This is what the hearing is about, and then we'll be going to the final plat yet tonight if there are no adverse comments. If you have any questions, I'd certainly take them.
Thank you, Glenn. Questions as part of the public hearing? John?
Just checking it, kind of rough math, this is about 50-some acres then. What would be considered shovel-ready?
Shovel-ready on both sides of Michigan Road. Have utilities to them. We would have to do some minor improvements like street lighting and things, but we didn't want to do that until there was a need to do it.
And Steve?
So Glenn, when you say that when we rent it out for bonding purposes,
Yep.
we would reimburse if we had a developer.
Yep.
And they came in and canceled the lease, and we would reimburse the farmer for inputs.
Yes.
Does that include their rent? So let's take this. I'm a farmer. I'm
Yep.
planting in the spring of 2020.
Yep.
I've got this 5-year lease.
Yep.
And in summer, somebody comes in and says, I want to start.
Yep.
And by the time that they get all the permitting done, I'm 1 month away from harvest.
Yep.
I'm going to get my rent back. I'm going to get my inputs for planting back.
Yep. Yes.
I'm not going to pay him for the lost harvest.
Now, if in fact he does then come in and he says, I know I can't get the corn off, but I'm going to hire another farmer to silage it. And so we deduct that as a benefit to him. So yes, we give him his rent back, we give him his inputs back, and then we also credit our reimbursement for what he got out of it. So it's really fair. It's really fair to the farmer, and it's really fair to us because if we would do that right before harvest, that new industrial user would be wanting to move on to the site right then. So-
We've done that on some of our other developer rental, where we've had the ag rent agreements and then had a developer, we've done this damage policy in recent past.
In the residential properties in Parkway 3.
That's the standard provision of our agriculture.
Yep. And it's important for both of us. And
Any
there's
other
never been a question.
input as part of the public hearing? If not, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So move.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John to close the public hearing. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Has everybody had a chance? We'll close the voting. That motion does pass. So then we'll now consider the resolution. The first resolution would be to approve the preliminary plat. Are there any questions about the preliminary plat? Just one question I have. The small little corner in the northwest corner that's not developable. It's also not constructed yet, right?
That is correct. So it would be farmable until that time. So that will be included in the rentable land.
Any other questions about the resolution? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the preliminary plat. Motion by Steve, seconded by Russ. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Okay, we'll close the vote. Are you in? We'll close the voting. And that motion does pass. Then we'll now consider the resolution that would approve the final plat. Once again, any questions? Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion by John, seconded by Russ. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. The motion passes. Now we'll then move to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 7. Agenda item number 7 is the public hearing. This is a public hearing that would amend the ordinance that relates to multiple family mobile home ordinances. So to conduct this public hearing, some of this is this public hearing, some of the purpose here is to update the current ordinance to comply and agree with state statute, and the other part is just a cleanup housekeeping part of that. But to conduct a public hearing and give a more detailed explanation what this issue is, I'll call on Ilya Gutman, building official.
Thank you, Mayor Council. This change was triggered by Paul Sherholz, who is the owner of the Broadmoor, the local trailer park. So he pointed out to the staff that several sections of our ordinance do not correspond and actually contradict the state statutes, and state statutes always take precedence. So we looked at that, and he was correct. So we changed those ordinance sections to comply with the state statutes. Mostly it's to make sure that our ordinance treats mobile homes, which are manufactured homes, and regular houses the same way in all residential districts. We also added a few other changes to line up and align our ordinance and make it easier and more easier to follow and more aligned with everything between the sections. These changes went through 2 planning commission meetings, through LNO meeting, and it was introduced in the last city council meeting. So this is the final vote.
Okay, thank you. So we'll open it up for any public comment, input, either from the council or the audience as part of this public hearing. No input, no comments. I'll call for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion by Steve, seconded by John to close the public hearing. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. And motion passes. So now then we'll consider the ordinance that was, again, the topic of the public hearing was recommended for approval by both the Ways and Means Committee as well as the Planning Commission. Are there any questions regarding that? What did I say? Legislative and Ordinance Committee, yes. Thank you for correcting me. Any questions about that ordinance? If not, is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Russ, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to voting. So we'll close the voting, and the motion passes. Okay, so then that brings us to the consent agenda. Bring the items up on the consent agenda, which includes the resolution designating the official newspaper, the resolution designating the official depositories for city funds for 2019. Consider the approval of the 2019 workers' compensation insurance. Consider the amendments to the data practice policies. Consider the authorization for the Southwest Minnesota CAT team to apply for the Hazardous Material Emergency Planning Grant Funds from the state of Minnesota, Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. Consider the exemption permit for Holy Redeemer Church for an event March 23rd, 2019. Consider on-sale intoxicating liquor license for Holy Redeemer Church for March 23rd, 2019. Consider the application for the on-sale intoxicating liquor license for Marshall Convention and Visitors Bureau for February 7, 2019. Consider the resolution delegating the authority for the city to make electronic fund transfers. Consider the approval of the resolution to authorize the finance director to pay certain claims. And finally, consider the approval of the bills and project payments. So is there any item on the consent agenda that any member of the council wants removed for purposes of separate discussion?
Number 10, please.
Number 10 will be removed. Any other item? You can let me know when you're ready. Okay, so you have the remaining items of the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve those items.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Craig. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. So we'll close the voting, and that motion passes. So we'll move to what was agenda item number 10, and now I believe it's agenda item number 19. And yeah, number 19, no, this is a, why do I not see that on my agenda?
Should be up on the screen. It's on here.
Okay, so the, this is the item that was agenda item number 10, the consider the approval of the 2019 workers' comp insurance. Russ, I'll turn to you. You have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just reading through the packets, it said that the 2019 premium reflects keeping the deductible and remaining at $5,000 per incident. Just curious, and for my information purposes, I'd like to know how long it's been at $5,000, and then also did we consider a higher deductible? I know typical homeowners, I know my deductible went up, my health insurance deductible goes up, and I have different areas that I can choose. I'm just wondering if the city did consider a higher deductible.
So it used to be 10,000. You're testing my memory. It was before I started, so 2014, 15, somewhere in the historical, and then it was moved to 5,000. It's been 5,000 since. Last year, we did look at lowering it, but not raising it. But this year we did not. We left it as is.
So would you say 5 years ago, maybe at least, that it was lowered from 10 to 5?
Yes.
Could the city save additional monies by increasing it back to 10?
I have not looked into that, so I would have to work with them to find out what the difference in rates
Something
are.
that's mandated through the League of Minnesota Cities or anything else? It's just, we have that option to choose.
We do have the option. We have the option. There's, if you look at page 2 of the premiums, we have an option of a deductible to go as low as $250 and high as $50,000.
And I think it's a credit to the employees at the city that we probably haven't had a lot of claims and a lot of
Right.
incidents. But I think that maybe we should take a look at a $10,000 deductible.
So in the $10,000 deductible, we would get $27,683 credit towards our premium. So our manual premium at this time is $387,718. We have an experience modifier that is based on past historical cases. Brings us down to our standard premium, and our deductible credit is based on the deductible that we choose.
What did you say the credit was for 10,000?
10,000 is going to be 10.5% a credit, which comes to $27,683.
Oh, because I have 27,832 on my sheet.
I apologize, I might not have the updated ones on the,
Anyway, it's $27,000 credit versus an $18,000 credit.
right,
It is, you did provide that material as far as the
Okay.
deductible, it is here.
okay.
Yeah. And, the deductible is per occurrence.
Correct.
It's not for the entire year or anything.
That is
so
correct.
That's something always to consider too.
The bigger question is how many times have we had to utilize workers' comp? If we don't use it, I think going up to a higher deductible makes sense. But if we're using it frequently, we don't save much. So off the top of our heads, do we know how many times in the past year, how many claims?
I don't have that information.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I know last year, I wasn't used to the high deductible, actually. In counties, we have a lot lower deductible for workers' comp. So I did do an analysis of, and I think I might have looked at both sides, lowering and hiring it, and we actually did pull claims for workers' comp and discovered at that time that 5,000 made the most economical sense from last year. We'd have to do another analysis. There's always a risk you could have an injury that would not result in savings after the time you pay that out. And I know there was one workers' comp injury, lost time, things like that did get quite expensive. So I don't know what the deadline for this is renewing, but if
We're past the deadline.
okay, because we could take some time and do an analysis and bring it back potentially, but
I think as long as we're past the deadline, I think I would recommend that city staff maybe take a look at it and analyze it for next year going forward, see if it does make sense. I agree with Councilman Meister that any given year you could have lots of claims, and any given year you could have 1 to 0 claims.
So it might be
So-
better to take a 5-year running average.
Absolutely. So do a little historical recap on it just to see what would happen, but I guess I would like to see that moving forward.
And actually that data is available because that's what the experience modifier is calculated based on, so.
City Administrator, you mentioned that maybe the counties that you're familiar with had a lower deductible amount? Is that
Yes.
what you said? And so maybe it would be worthwhile looking at what other cities are using for deductible. And again, you never know year to year whether it's a good or which way to go based on past experience. That it can change every year, but it would be worth knowing what similar types of cities, similar to Marshall, would be having as a deductible, and at least know if we're similar to other cities or we're quite a bit different.
Okay. Anything else?
So one other question that I have for Sharon. So our fire department is also covered under our workers' comp, correct? And so
those scenes, that, because of the work they do and the nature of that, that's probably one of our exposures, and that's certainly not a dig for our fire department. It's just a measure of the risk they take. And looking at that, and I know that, I'm sure Sharon did a good job of digging into this. I'm always a little bit reluctant to play the deductible game, because it really is, you're kind of buying a lottery ticket, making a bet with the insurance company that we're going to be fine. And looking at, to me, putting a higher deductible is like welcoming change orders on projects. It can be kind of a budgetary nightmare, so I prefer to keep it somewhat moderate, and I appreciate the recommendation of the 5,000. But I also respect Councilmember Bat's questions. If you guys want to look at that, I'm always a little bit leery of high deductibles for a number of employees. I think we just carry kind of a potential risk, because we have to do a lot of things. Do a lot of other projects that we sit that are a little bit exposed.
So I sense there's interest from the council in looking at this further in another year, but for this year renewing, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion by Russ, seconded by Craig. Discussion?
Now, MMU is affected by this workman's comp policy too, is that?
That's correct.
That's correct. So before we'd make any changes, it would be good to confer with them and see what they think about the high or low deductible too.
Any other discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting, and that motion does pass. Okay, agenda item number 19. Agenda item number 19 is the selection of the City Council President Pro Tem by the City Council. This is a choice made by the City Council. The role of the President Pro Tem is to, in case the mayor becomes absent or incapacitated or somehow loses his senses, that the President Pro Tem will take over. So, so and also the to stand in on especially some of these ceremonial things. If I'm not available, then to welcome groups to the city or do some other things. So. With that, it's the choice of the council, so I'd open it up to the council for nominations.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to nominate Councilmember Craig.
Are there any other nominations?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to nominate Jim Lozinski.
Are there any other nominations? Not, is there a motion that the nominations close?
Make that motion.
Motion by Steve.
Second.
Seconded by Russ to close the nominations. Kyle, I think we're off. We're going to do voice votes on this. Okay. So all in favor of closing nominations, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes. We have 2 members in nomination. Now, let me look to the council. We either do a voice vote on each of the applicants, or we could do a paper ballot and record them. What's the pleasure? Okay. Paper. And Kyle, would you collect the ballots? So everyone write one name down of one of the 2 individuals that have been nominated. Now, as city clerk, if you tally the ballots and report back the results. So the Councilmember DeCramer received the most votes, I would entertain a motion to appoint John DeCramer as President Pro Tem of the City Council.
So moved.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Craig, seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. And we're back on electronic. We'll close the voting. And the motion does pass. Congratulations, John. I'll try not to make you work too hard. So we will then move to agenda item number 20 to consider the the mayoral appointments of the council members for various boards and committees. Sharon, could we bring that this item up on the screen, the attachment? Thank you. So I provided to the council members my recommendations for the various boards and commissions. I'd make just a quick comment on this. The liaisons to the boards and commissions, as well as the council committees, these are important appointments. As liaisons, the council members not only represent their interests of their constituents that they represent, but just as importantly, they represent the council. So if you are the liaison to a board or commission, you are representing the council on that. So this is the list, and we've made only a few changes. Typically, the major reshuffling happens when the term of the mayor is up, and that's in 2 years. So, so the only changes that we have made, we have Councilmember Labatt taking many of the roles that David Sturrock had on that list. I would make a couple of adjustments. So if we look at the Joint Law Enforcement Center Management Committee, where Jim Lazinski is there, we anticipate that that group is going to meet and be more active. So I would like to add Craig Schaefer along with Jim Lazinski there. And then a little bit farther down, where it's the City Council County Board Library Agreement and Operations. This is the committee that meets once a year and reviews the recommended budget that will be forwarded to the city and the county for consideration. This was my error. That really should be the liaison from that library board. So cross off Craig Schaefer's name and write in Russ Labatt's name. And then the council committees then stand as they have been in the past, with Councilmember Labatt taking the role that David Sturrock had on the Ways and Means Committee, as well as the Public Improvement and Transportation Committee. And while I said that the role of the liaisons were important in representing the interest of not only the city but also the council committees are truly where a lot of the work happens, a lot of the detail work. So my appreciation to the members of all of those committees and all the council members are active on that. So thank you for your time on that. With that, I'd offer that if there's any suggestions, I'm open to that. Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to affirm those appointments.
So move.
Second. Motion by Russ, seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Everybody's in, we'll close the voting. And that motion does pass. We'll move then to agenda item number, the next agenda item is the item that we had moved up on the agenda that would show on the original agenda as agenda item number 26. This is the request to move a dwelling into the residential district at 312 Warsaw Circle. I'll call on Ilya Gutman to present this request.
Thank you, Mayor Council. The city ordinance outlines the procedure for moving used houses into residential area. And currently, the current request is to move a house which is located in Milroy to Warsaw Circle. You should have the picture of the house somewhere there. Here's the house. The procedure first requires that the house be inspected, and that has been done. Ray Henriksen was there, and the opinion is that this house is in relatively good shape, and it is suitable for moving to Marshall. Of course, the requirement of the building code that the house, when it's moved, will have to meet the full building code requirements. The second part of the procedure is that the council looks at this and makes a determination that the house fits the locale, the neighborhood. Right now, there are not too many houses in Warsaw Circle. I think there are 2 houses right now. They are mid-2000. The size is about the same. They all have a double garage, attached garage. So, this house, if you look at the picture, it looks like there is some brick veneer, but in fact, the owner said that he would re-side the house, so it will be full siding, and it will be also re-shingled. So all exterior finishes will be new. So the recommendation is that it does fit, and this is just introduction because there should be a public hearing next council meeting.
Questions for Ilya?
Just a question. It says on the documentation that we have, the owner is considering replacing the roof, siding, windows, and door prior to relocation. Does he have to replace all of those or some of those, or can he replace some once the move? Can he replace, for example, the windows? Can he replace the windows once he gets the house moved?
Yes, he can.
Okay.
He can. But that was his choice. He said that he would do it before moving.
Okay.
And he may change his mind, but it's...
Okay, and typical...
As far as we are concerned, it's either way.
Typical building permit, the whole works?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Other questions?
There's only a couple of homes right next to it. I mean, it's in a development area, correct? And I assume those homes are built since 2000 or?
Yes, they're mid-2000.
And this house was built in 1968?
Correct.
And so my concern was moving a 1968 house into a newer neighborhood, especially where there are some undeveloped lots, and concern whether or not people would want to move into a house that's built in 1968. But, in this memo here, the inspection report, it talks about all windows and doors are being replaced.
Correct.
And siding's changing, so it's going to appear like a newer house.
Yes.
On the outside.
Yes.
And I assume I'm not sure what it's going to look like on the inside, but at least from the outside, it's going to look like a newer house and fit more into the neighborhood.
And size-wise, this house is about the same as the houses which are there right now. They said that they have double attached garages.
And neighbors haven't indicated a real concern about
have
this type of thing happening.
Yeah. We can also,
However, if they did have concerns, that's what the public hearing is for, so they
Right.
can bring that forward. So.
Right.
correct.
But we haven't heard any
No,
at this
We
point.
cannot. We checked on that. No, we cannot.
Other questions of Ilya?
So the motion you're looking for, Mr. Mayor, is to call for a public hearing?
That's correct.
I make that motion. Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. And that motion passed. Oh,
Reopen the voting.
no, reopen the voting, so. Now we'll close the voting. And the motion still passes, so. We'll move then, thank you, Ilya. We'll move then to agenda item number 21, Phase 1 wastewater treatment improvement. This is a presentation by Bolton and Mink. This is an information-only item presentation. So with that, I'll call on Glenn Olson, who will introduce those who are going to present.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Bob Van Moore, I'd like you to come forward too. And John is here from Bolton and Mink. There's an awful lot of work that's been done, both by the consultant and our city wastewater staff on this process. And you can see by the value of the project, it is a very extensive project that takes place maybe every 20, 30 years. So I'll have Bob introduce the project, and then John will describe the individual project.
We've been planning this for quite a few, actually years now, knowing that we're going to have to do something. This is phase one of the two-phase projects that came out of the facility plan. We've had some unknowns currently with where we're at with regulations that potentially could come down for total nitrogen limits. We wanted to address that as a different phase because we have some immediate needs that need to be taken care of. So phase one is a large part of it is just going to be rehabbing existing equipment that's anywhere from 25 to 40 years old. Then also we'll be adding a couple processes that we were kind of lacking at this time too. So we've been taking a lot of time going over, making sure that we are including what needs to be included up front. The cost of the project has snuck up a little bit, but we feel very confident that these are items that we should be addressing now. So John Peterson from Bolton and Mink has been the engineer on the project. He's going to give us a quick overview of what the project's going to consist of, how the financing will go, and if there's any questions, he should be able to answer them. So, John.
Thank you, Bob.
Am I going to run that from here?
The down arrow moving forward.
Right there. All right. I think I can handle that. Thank you. I'll try to move along because besides Bob and Scott and I, most people don't sit around and chit-chat about wastewater. So if you have questions, you might. Okay, well, maybe we want to have a little party later and talk about it then. But certainly stop me if you've got questions as we go. So just quickly, I want to talk about how we got where we are with this overall, the project and where it fits. We're going to talk about the permit a little bit and how that impacts the overall project. We'll go over the components that are going into this one, the cost, and how we're going to fund that, or how we're proposing to fund that. And then just generally a project schedule about how we're moving forward at this point, okay? So as Bob noted, the facility plan was done back in 2017, and the three real drivers is it identified what needs will be over the next 20 years to meet the growth and economic stability of the community to treat what's coming in, because you have a large industrial component to your wastewater. We identified just plain equipment, because as Bob noted, 25 to 40 years is a long time on some of that equipment. It gets some pretty rugged use. So some of that's just simply stuff needs to be replaced. We have permit changes that are afoot, and that drives some of what we do at the wastewater plant, because we have to keep meeting new permits. It also drives, I think, believe what you're doing at the water plant, and that kind of ties into this discussion later, okay? So we developed a phased approach, you know, in the kind of two big phases. This is just the first phase. We believe the second phase will get pushed off based on this permit discussion that I'll bring up a little more later, maybe a little further than we thought. So while cost might have creeped up a little overall, the 17 million that was in two phases will get pushed out a little further, we believe. So in terms of the permit, we were required to do something called whole effluent toxicity testing, okay? And you do that on the water you're discharging to the stream you discharge through to see if it's got any other toxicity problems within it. And we were doing that toxicity testing based on what we assumed the future water would be when you put the water plant online, okay? Because what you get in the drinking water comes down to the wastewater, and the stuff that's causing the toxicity, like chlorides, is really in the drinking water. That's why you're doing what you're doing there. So we saw this correlation between some chloride and nitrates that wasn't real clear and what was causing the toxicity. And so what we propose now to the PCA is let us get the water plant online. We'll retest the water to see what we have for water, retest the toxicity, okay? And then we'll see what we got. Because what causes the toxicity drives the process, could very much drive what you're spending every year to treat the problem, okay? So, for instance, if it was nitrate, if we get a limit of 20 on nitrate, we can almost hit that without doing much. But if we get a limit of 10, it's a $500,000 a year of expense you're going to incur. So it kind of matters to us, right, to know what really is causing the problem. So we're telling PCA we want to push that out and get the real numbers. And they so far have agreed to that. Because of our scheduling, we submitted for the new permit. It's on a 5-year cycle. That permit was due or application was due in December. That's done. So sometime this year they should issue a new permit. We believe that permit will maintain the current levels with the idea that within the 5 years we'll finish the testing again. In the next permit cycle you'll start seeing how soon you're going to get that next limit put on. Okay? That's further out than when we first wrote this a couple of years ago than we thought it would come. So that's where we're able to delay that phase 2 out a little bit. Okay? The other little permit issue that lurks around there is ADM has their own discharge permit for some wastewater. They send most of their phosphorus-laden wastewater to the municipal plant, so they cause quite a bit of that load. If they get a different permit there and they're still ironing out what that looks like and what they will do with it, but potentially they could change what they discharge to the city, which would then change what we have to treat. And mostly if they cut back on phosphorus, it'll cut back on our biosolids needs, particularly treatment more than storage, but treatment needs would go down, and that would impact us. So that's why we pushed off that piece of this project until we know what's going to happen with them. So it's all kind of it's a lot of moving parts, and that's why you see us spending time making sure we're getting the right pieces in, okay? Because those parts aren't cheap, so we want to make sure we're doing the right piece. So the upgrade right now is mostly items meant to replace things or take care of a few what we'll call bottlenecks in the process. So that third clarifier in our process, the final clarifier, that's a bottleneck in the plant. We're going to alleviate by adding one. The sludge storage is kind of a combination because some of our existing sludge storage is very old and doesn't work very well for us. So this will clean up some of our management issues and give us storage to allow them to cycle the biosolids out to the fields on a better cycle, because we can't go when crops are being grown very easily, so things like that. And then most of the rest of it is refurbishment and replacement. Those trickling filters have been in since the early 90s and nothing's been done to them. They need work. Pumping needs work with that. The aeration system's been in longer than that. It needs work. We also believe we can get some economy in blower sizing and cut our horsepower down to save some cost in terms of energy use. And then these pumps are just old and are ready to be replaced. And we'll show you a few photos just so you can see how that looks. So the two big items in the phase 2 upgrade that aren't coming are the ATAD due to the biosolids discussion. And we'd have to modify to get total nitrogen. And the actual capital cost of that isn't the problem. It's the operational cost. It's an extra maybe $500,000 a year if they give us that limit, when they give us that limit, okay? And so that's why we're trying to push that off as far as we can to make sure we're getting to the right place. Now just a few photos to kind of show you. You can see the biosolid storage is planned on the upper, do I got a, right there? Oh, there it is. There's the biosolids storage is planned for up here. This is the existing 2 storage. This is the old storage down here, so we're kind of consolidating all the storage up in one area to help with management. The trickling filters over here, it's down in this here. We're replacing the pumping there. This is where the new final clarifier goes, and then most of the rest of the work is within existing buildings where we're replacing pumps and such. And again, just a few photos to give you a feel for that, what you've got going on now. This is the trickling filter. This is actually where the pumps are down below, and they've been problematic, so we're going to change to a different style pump to try to help with that. That's actually the trickling filter structure that will replace the media within, and the roofing that's leaking, and all sorts of other things that are going on there. And then this is just more. These clarifier pumps have been in since, I believe, the 70s. Is that true? Yeah. So these have been in a while, so we're just going to replace the pumps. Pretty much in place. The pump's been good, obviously, so we're going back to a similar pump. But it's showing wear. It's due. Same thing with this primary clarifier pump. It's been in. It's just showing wear. These blowers are, I think, 200 horse now, and we're gonna be down under 100 by the time we're done with the new blower hybrid efficiencies and some other things we do with managing air control on the system. This was just to show you when we now build a model. This is the 3D model. We built this for the whole plant. This one shows the new sludge storage with the two existing next to it. So we model that whole thing in 3D now as we build plans. This was just more to show that we kind of are able to do that with the whole facility now.
So probably a level of detail
No, go ahead.
we don't need to get into, but that's a rectangular building. The other storage are round.
Yep.
How do you empty it?
We built that one into, we're going to build that into compartments. Part of the problem when you're getting that sludge, the guys do a great job. They thicken that sludge like crazy, but that also makes it hard to mix. So it makes it cheaper to get it on the field because we have less loads to get out. But you got to mix it, and it's just this side of pudding. And so we built it into smaller compartments where they can get the supernate, what we call the supernate, the clear water off of it, and keep it mixed in a smaller compartment. And then when we get ready to start to move it out, we're going to put it over in the two bigger round tanks and just keep it mixed until we take it out. And they've got a whole other issue too with when we go out. They want to make sure that we've tested it appropriately so we know what we're going out with. So you kind of got to isolate it while you're doing that, and it's a whole management thing. So right now we're estimating that construction cost at around 9.5, and then you've got engineering, legal, and everything else on top of that. So this is
That's phase 1 and 2.
This is phase 1. Before your two phases before were just over 17 million, with phase 1 at about 9.5. So you're at just under 11 now. But we shoved some maintenance work out of the phase 2 to get it done in phase 1 because we think phase 2 is going out further now. So the only caveat I'll throw is, of course, we see some volatility in bidding. We'll try to give them enough time and allocate space to get things done. Because you have two big factors. One is steel, and there's a lot of steel and equipment and a lot of steel and rebar going into our tanks that we're building, the clarifier and the sludge tank. So that cost fluctuates quite a bit right now. And labor is hard to find. So getting enough bodies in to do the work is, so if you give them enough time to get to it, that becomes a little less of an issue when they bid. Okay, and we can work around that. This is going to be done in sequence anyways because we have to obviously keep the plant running. You know, while we're doing the work. At this point, what most of the discussion has been around is using the Minnesota Public Facilities Authority, the PFA, their revolving loan program. Okay, you don't have to, but that's been a very good program. Interest rates are, I believe, still under 2% right now on that. You enter a loan agreement with them. PCA certifies the project to them, and all that is in process. Well, the loan isn't it's sort of in process, but not really. You'll get a chance to see that when it comes through. And then monthly draws are set up. So you're not fronting any money through that. Okay? You submit the draw to the PFA by the middle of the month, and they put money back in the account before the end of the month, and then you disperse it. So you don't have to front money. You don't get charged interest until you incur the money draw. Okay, so you don't, once you sign for the loan, until you start to take the money out, there's no interest coming. You know, so it's been a pretty economical way of getting water and wastewater facilities funded. Okay, yeah, yes.
With regard to the $10.9 million,
yeah.
Do we have an idea as to how much of that we will be borrowing? How much the loan is going to be for?
Well,
is it going to be for all of it?
We did talk about maybe bringing some wastewater reserves down into this, and that's still, we don't know where for sure we're going to be with that. But the intent is to draw our reserves down a little bit to help offset.
And the intent was in the application to apply for the entire phase 1 and phase 2. So for the first phase, it's going to be covered. We don't know really what the limits are going to be for phase 2 at this time because, number one, we don't know what the requirements are going to be, so we don't know what the construction is going to be. So this part is within the 17.5 million that's been, I won't say it's been allocated, but I'll say it's essentially been allocated.
I guess I was wondering how much of the reserve we'd be using, and is the idea to hold back some of the reserve for the phase 2, or?
We haven't got into real physical discussion of that. It's just with the overall spring steads of the wastewater fund, it was discussed that we could probably afford to bring some of those reserves down to offset some of the construction costs. We haven't been to that point yet.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
What we've seen most of our other clients do is go ahead and take the loan for the whole thing because it's a pretty low interest. Then you can decide when you see where you land, if you can just simply pay the loan down quicker with the reserve and cut the interest on it at that point. But that leaves that option open for you to then use the reserve for a second phase or some other work that you're doing. But that's a issue you'll deal with your financial consultants and everything about how you manage.
We would expect to complete that after we get the bids in.
Yeah, when we know the real number.
When you know the real number, yep.
And the PFA, or the PFA funding is pretty stable because that's revolving, correct?
Yes.
So we're not waiting for approval from the legislature.
No.
For additional funding. It's all, the money's there, it's in the public facilities
True.
account, and it's just, it continues to self-replenish.
True.
Okay.
This is the schedule we've laid out at this point. So we'll be back in a couple of weeks asking you to authorize that we go out to bid, okay? And then we'll take bids and be back to have that discussion when we see how the bids come in about how we go forward with that. The only thing at this point driving this is we want to get it out so we get bids, so we get contractors lined up. You have no regulatory reason to drive it, okay? There's a couple things the guys really want done first, but there's nothing else in there making you make this decision today, right? But you can't put it off forever because you got things that are going to fall apart. But
Do you know how many facilities do you anticipate are going to come out now in about this point in time to go out on bids? Or how many people are we?
This schedule, and I would say as long as we even get it out to bid by May, you'll be ahead of most because the way the normal, because we were on last year's cycle. So what goes on when you, the way our funding cycle is set up, you need to be submitted by early March to be on the schedule for that year. So everybody submits their plans in early March and they get reviewed and then we all bid in June, right? Well, you're ahead of that because we actually are in last year's money, okay? We're approved from last year's money, but we took our time because of these other permit issues that kept popping up. So we're a little ahead of most of that. So we should get on a schedule that works.
So we'll have a little hungrier, more aggressive.
We should have them looking pretty aggressively at it, and we're gonna, like I noted, we'll give them enough time to fit it too, because there's a couple big pieces, and then there's a lot of little ones that just but they take a little coordination because again we have to keep the plant running. So to take, say, those final clarifier pumps down, we can only do one at a crack. We can't just let them have the whole room and have at it. So, but we should be in pretty good shape, I think, that way. Okay. And then you can see we're picturing you've got at least one more permit cycle before you see the phase 2 work start to come. Okay. The only thing that would drive that is if you got a big shift in your industrial load for some reason and that cause a biosolid issue. We have a lot of capacity elsewhere in the plant, but in the biosolids that might drive something. Okay. I think that's what I have.
Okay, thank you. Bob or Scott or Glenn, do you have anything more?
No.
Okay, we'll open up for questions. Glenn?
Just a quick question here about ADM. You said their permit is under review. So they're pretty much on the same 5-year cycle that we are for permits, or?
They're on a 5-year cycle. It's not.
Theirs has been expired for a couple of years now.
They're actually ahead of us, but they're just not renewing them, right?
Yeah, I believe that's true.
They've been working through issues there with MPCA, so they're.
But if they do get it approved, they'll be on somewhat the same 5 years if they get approved fairly soon.
They could be very close to us, actually.
Yeah.
And no matter what happens with regard to ADM's permit or plans for the future, what we're doing here as far as construction will handle all possibilities, whether they increase what they do or decrease what they do. The construction we're going to do, it will put us in a position where we can handle anything.
We looked out at 20-year projection of any potential growth. Yeah, shy of a large industrial addition, we should be looking very good.
John?
Just out of curiosity, you're talking about the, the pumps, the blowers,
Mhm.
this kind of thing, mechanical. How much during a day do these run? Been running for a number of years?
Well, so like those blowers run, you have a blower running 24/7. Yeah, we build redundancy, so not every blower is running 24/7. And similar with the final clarifier pumps are probably running darn near 24/7 also. And so they run.
Got a lot of good use out of them.
Yeah, so and it isn't that maybe some motor work and other things like that haven't been done, but you're down to the point where even finding parts sometimes becomes hard and things like that. But yeah, no, they put some heavy use on.
Greg, did you have a question? Sharon?
I just want a clarification. You mentioned drinking water and chloride.
Mm-hmm.
And that typically would come into play in the home after softening by the homeowner, or are you saying water prior to home treatment?
You get it at both places, okay? But you have hardness in your water now that comes out, and whether it comes out at the home. So when they take it out of the home with the softener, they just put it back in the wastewater stream. We get it no matter what. So it's not just the salt they're using for the exchange. It's the hardness in the water even to begin with is what's triggering the chloride problem at the wastewater plant. So you solve that at the water plant by going to lime softening, where you take the hardness out in with the lime sludge
But
and
the
distribute
chloride
that.
is not the hardness part.
No, but it's all tied into it.
Right.
Yes.
But the chloride comes in with the softening.
Well, it makes it worse. Yes.
Right. Okay. I just want to clarify that so there isn't this thought that there's chloride in the water.
Well, we call it
prior
chlorides, but
to
it's a
the
salty
home.
discharge, and there are other ions that are in there, and we just all lump them in with chloride. So, yeah, but you're right. People get that impression. Yes.
I'd just like to put the invite out to any of the council members that want to come out and get a tour and see firsthand what's actually going on and what we're looking at for, I don't believe Russ has probably been out there, so very informal. I know a few of you others have been, but so any time, just contact me, and in about an hour we can get through the treatment plant pretty decent. So
it is well worthwhile, and it's really striking the amount of technology and science that is in the treatment plant. So, very good. Any other questions?
It's not your dad's wastewater.
Glenn?
Yeah. I want them to comment, one or both of them, on regulatory certainty. That's been brought up in the past because of the issues of whether or not an industry can make a long-term investment in any community without that. So maybe we should just explain what that means and explain what that means to us as a community.
So when they proposed this, what they call regulatory certainty, they're basically saying that if you agree to, say, the lower level of nitrate discharge or phosphorus, we already have a phosphorus limit, okay? But if you'll agree to this lower level, we promise for 16 years to not change your level, right? But in this case, you already have phosphorus as a limit, so that's off the books. And then we had this discussion about nitrate and whether we're not dead sure how bad our nitrate problem is, and it's a $500,000 a year discussion, okay? So to me, there's no big benefit for you to go volunteer for a lower limit on any of that at this point, because the finances just don't work out. If you look at the actual capital investment to get to a nitrate limit is not that much, but it's the operational part that just goes on, lives forever at that point. And then you've committed to that forever, because they don't they don't allow any backsliding, so they'll never be saying, well, we shouldn't have done that. We wish we'd left it at 20 instead of 10. Too bad.
and then that provision is only for new permit limits. So like with phase one, we're not getting any new permit limits, so we wouldn't qualify for this in phase one. But now if we go to total nitrogen in phase two, then we would qualify for that. And along with that, then we would qualify for probably a PSIG grant also for that, being it's a new limit.
Again, for that portion.
Yeah,
But that's for construction only.
And that's the carrot that we talked
Yeah.
about a year or so ago. That if we do this, we're going to be able to It was kind of in Brad's presentation, Brad Ruiz, where we talked about if we do this and we get the grant up front, it's actually, if all the pieces would have played under that scenario, I think it was some 14 or 15 months ago, we could actually see forecast a slight reduction in our user rates overall. It would have been a cost savings, but all those pieces would have to fall into place in the right order in order for that to work out. So it's a complicated puzzle of project, and everything runs downhill. So the PCA is reading the letter of the law into what the EPA is telling them, and then that's EPA Chicago, not necessarily EPA Washington. So it's quite a game of cause and effect.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you. We'll move then to the next agenda item, which is the presentation, this informational presentation about from the Lyon County Historical Society. So, welcome. And you have good news to share, so that's great.
What's that?
You have good news to share.
Yes, we do. Yes. Come up here. Yes. Good evening, Mayor, council members, and staff. Thank you for having us here. I'm Jennifer Andrews, director, and this is Andrea Hess, our board president. And I'm going to let Andrea start by sharing the great news that we want to share with you.
All right, so I'm Andrea Hess, president of the board. And as you guys have known, we have been working for the last 3 to 4 years on the second floor exhibit space. And we do have, and hopefully you have the press release in front of you, but we have great news in extending our thank you because we did receive the grant for over $265,000 from the Minnesota Historical Society. And that is in part due to your support, all the rest of the city councils, the townships, private industry within Lyon County, and personal members of the museum. With all those funds, they've together combined $144,000 match, and that cash match was what helped us secure that grant. And so tonight we're here to just say thank you for your support, and we'll hear more.
Okay. So we signed the grant agreements and we can begin work. So in a couple of weeks, we'll be meeting with our exhibit developer, Museology, to get started. We are meeting with the electrician this week to talk about exhibit lighting on the second floor. So we'll be starting work, and we are going to have a kind of an open house reception in May for all of the cities, the county that have supported this project to come to the museum and see what plans we have at that point, because we have a very good feeling by May we'll have updated construction drawings and a timeline as far as completion for the project. So we will be sending out a formal invite soon for reception in May for everyone who donated towards that cash match for the second floor. As you can tell, we're very excited to be doing this project. 3 years in the making. It's going to be a phenomenal exhibit space with highly interactive displays and very hands-on. And the biggest thing, educational. It's very important for our visitors when they come in the museum to, whether they live here or they're visiting here, to know what Lyon County is about 100 years ago, but also up to more recently too. So we just want to say thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for your support.
Well, yeah, congratulations. Thank you.
We are excited.
You know, you mentioned the support was from the cities was important, but I think we wouldn't have got there without the leadership and the vision of the board and director. So thank you.
And then I should mention that every municipality in Lyon County committed funds towards the project. So we are very excited that this is a Lyon County effort.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that has been the board's desire and Jennifer's, that this truly is a Lyon County museum. So we represent everybody within Lyon County. And that's what we're striving for.
Yeah.
Very good.
So.
Jennifer Andrews, after this project is done, will you have any space left? I mean, will it be basement that's left to do, or?
Well, you know, we have our exhibit galleries pretty well set up in the basement and the main floor. But our next big project will really be the collection, getting our collection more organized and onto our, we have a it's called Past Perfect as a software program, but updating that to an open source where we can really make our collection more accessible to the public. So that's going to be our next big project, because that's really what museums are going towards is that if you come into the museum, we should be able to let you know right away whether we have something or not. Or if you're sitting at home on your computer and want to see what resources we have at the museum.
And I can kind of stem off of what you're saying. The whole intention also is that we can share resources with Tracy, Peloton, Cottonwood, anybody. So if somebody wants to have an exhibit of some sort, they certainly have the resources. We can say, yes, we have this artifact is available. Or we can share with each other, which is also what we want to do. So, but as far as the board's perspective, the next phase is that we've already implemented, at the end of this, will be our full 5-year strategic plan. And I think we're going to start working towards that next 5 years, and helping Jennifer get to that point. So
you and the board should be commended for, you look at where you were 10 years ago, or and you've come a long way. You really should be commended.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. And
Have a wonderful night.
Yes.
Thank you.
We'll move then to agenda item number 23. This is the Merit Center Driving Track Phase 2. The action here would be to approve the plans and specifications and order the advertisement for the bids. We have the representative of the consultant here, but I want Glenn Olson to introduce this topic.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. John Schwitzenberg is here from Grafe Incorporated. They were hired to do a design of the track. They had the most experience in track design during our call for proposals. And so I'm just going to introduce John. It's kind of exciting news that we're ready to go. And we've had a lot of inquiry already from contractors interested in getting this out to bid. So John, if you want to do your presentation, then we'll take any questions.
Good evening, Mayor and council members and staff. Like Glenn said, my name is John Schwitzenberg. I'm from Grafe. I actually managed our office in our Minneapolis office. We were happy to take on this project. It was like Glenn mentioned, we have a lot of experience in track design, which really leads towards the project. We wanted to talk a little bit tonight about the specifics of the project a little bit, talk about the engineer's estimate, talk about the bidding process, and then obviously, like the mayor said, get you a request from the council to approve us to go out and publish the advertisement for bid and to receive bids, and then come back after that with our recommendations along with the staff. So with that, the project really started out, the first part of the contract was really to develop the 1.5 mile loop track, the skid pad itself, and then obviously do the stormwater portion of the project as well. After going through that and starting the project, we did a preliminary estimate and came back to the staff with that and decided that we could add on some of the other things that were alternates initially. So with that, we added the cold storage building, parking lot, and a building package, a cul-de-sac, loading dock prop, extension of the skid pad to actually make it longer, and then along with the cul-de-sac comes some reconstruction of part of the existing track where that connection is being made. From a permitting perspective, we're ready to advertise for bids, and then to review those, make recommendations to the city, and then obtain the necessary permits. The one thing I don't have up there that I thought about talking about too is the stormwater report, which is primarily done. It's under a little bit of review, and that'll be submitted to the city for their review as well and approval. From a construction administration standpoint, our contract is to do shop drawing reviews, respond to questions, and then the city would do the remainder of the construction administration. So with that, the project itself is, and obviously the major part is the extension of the track. The skid pad, which we've actually designed several of these. The front portion of this will actually be, it's a diamond plated concrete. So what it does is it it's not really diamonds, it's how it's designed. But it's, so what it is, it allows for the vehicle to come in at a high speed, skid, and then after the skid, be able to recuperate before it gets to the end of the path.
So that was actually, if I could interrupt, that was my question when I was looking at this drawing, is you're going to get up to the high rate of speed coming from the north, right?
Yes, so the rate is, you would actually come into the pad here, and then
So with those curves there, will you be able to?
Yes.
You would still be able to get to that speed?
Yes.
Okay.
Then in addition to that, so there is, this shows it better, I guess. There is, the loading dock prop that was added is actually on the skills pad, on the concrete here as well. That loading dock prop will have a ramp, and then the truck will be able to back up to it. It's designed to be broke away, so it's not going to damage everything. There's breakaways on it that would, if a truck came in too fast and hit it, it would break away rather than damaging everything. The cold storage building is on the northern part of the property. So we designed the parking lot to go around it. The building itself is a package. So if you look at the bids, it's actually a complete package. There are specs that it'll be a composite roof with a steel shell. Wooden shell with, or wooden framing with a steel exterior. So, but again, a full package. There was no design in the building at all. We eliminated that from our scope to make it cheaper on the design side. The cul-de-sac is another option in the bidding, and again, there's a piece here where we're going to tie into, and then we instead of just having the cul-de-sac come off, we actually had the cul-de-sac then come over and tie into the skid, or into the driving pad as well. There was a project manual that's about 300 pages thick. It's all the specs, all the description, everything that the bidders needed to actually do a bidding package. The only update to that is we did update the spec of the steel exterior of the building, and a couple other minor things that staff had found through their review. So those will be updated and given back to Glenn and staff so that they can get published and then get published onto the websites as well. So the engineer's estimate, the final one was very, very close to where we were. Very close to where we were when we did our preliminary estimate. So if you look at, I'll just skip through this and we'll look at the bottom numbers. Actually, I'll take you to the next slide if it shows it better. So the overall project had a $3.1 million price tag initially. Our design fees are $87,000. The project estimate for the base, which was the skid pad, the stormwater, and the track itself, is $2.65, and that's construction dollars. The perimeter fencing is alternative A. Alternative A then is 193 approximately. It's a little less than that. The cul-de-sac was alternative B, which is just under 103. And then the cold storage is alternate C, which is under 130, just under 132. So total all that up, and you really get 3.16 million. So if the bids do come in, obviously slightly over budget, then we'll have to make a decision, or help the staff make a decision on which one of those alternates they don't want to do, and then move forward. But we're hopeful that it'll come in at or just under that total. It should. Some of it is a little bit. The building is one thing. The building is estimated at $47,000. It's a total bid package altogether, so it could come in less. It could come in slightly more. That's the one thing. The one thing in the bid that is a little, I don't want to say skeptical, but a little questionable, I guess. But our architects, our industrial architects, came up with the estimate, and they feel it's high, so we're hoping that it comes in a little lower. So I guess what we're asking you to do is to authorize us to go ahead and advertise for bids, and then go through the bidding process and come up with a recommendation with staff. They would need to be sent out to the publications tomorrow morning. So if you still choose to have us move forward, we'll do that. Again, we'll get the package put together, get to Glenn so we can get it out to anybody who wants to bid on the project. It'll be advertised in, if I had it in here or not. Yeah, I do. It'll be advertised in the Marshall Independent, the Finance and Commerce, your website, and then we're anticipating to get it in on two other websites, MnDOT's e-advert website and then the eGram. Technically only need 3, but it doesn't hurt to get it out there and hopefully get some better bids if it's more visible.
Who's Finance and Commerce? Is that the state finance?
Yes.
Okay, so that's that state bid pack.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Questions? Go ahead, John.
Okay. A couple of things that just confirm that it's, I'm assuming it is, confirm it is in there. You know, for the, we remember right, back, like training, to be able to put up to 90 miles an hour going around that first curve. Is that's still part of the plan and in there?
Yes.
Okay.
I was just wondering about the maintenance, you know, the asphalt track. I mean, is it like a regular street where you have to seal it after so many years? And what kind of maintenance goes with this project then?
Yeah, I mean, it's designed just like a normal asphalt road. So, I mean, it's basically an asphalt road with it sitting out there. From a perspective of maintenance, obviously it's not having thousands and thousands of cars every day on it. But you still need to do the surface maintenance. You know, whether, I don't know if you do crack sealing, I'm guessing you do. So probably would need to do crack sealing. When you do crack sealing, you know, add that into, you know, your maintenance for your normal streets. So.
Other questions?
Maybe the funding should be addressed. The 3.1 million is part of a grant, state grant. However, the local participation of that has already been paid. We've done that when we bought the property. It was part of the original grant. So this is what we want to do. What our target is to fund this project by the grant with no additional funding. Now, we'll see what happens when the bids come in and the recommendation that will come forward. We want to make sure that all that's in place before we award the bid.
And just to clarify, not exactly a grant, this was provided capital, state capital investment.
That is correct.
Bonding bill. Greg, you had a point?
Yeah, I don't remember what it was.
If John remembers his second.
Yes, I got the second item was, first of all, does this need to go through the merit board? And has it gone through the merit board?
It has not, and I don't know that it has to. I think that there was a work group assigned, and I think that's the representation. It's the, you know, basically city property, they were part of the planning group,
Yeah.
correct?
Yes.
Yep, that's my understanding. So.
And they did go through the review process of the plans and specs as well. So Jasmine did get that opportunity and had very little comments. So.
And the other
Am
point.
I right on that, Jim? I mean, that's, yep.
And the other point is, as far as timing, if this is authorized tonight, similar to the last presentation, not the last one, the one before that, it's probably a good time right now.
Yes, I mean, what we're trying to do is get it so that we can come back to you early February, get this awarded, and they can go through the early part of the construction season. And
well, there's still contractors that are filling their schedule of work.
Yep. One small comment is that the reason for the loading dock was that was one of the reasons why they couldn't use it for their truck rodeo. on Fairview Street is because there was no loading dock out there. So maybe it provides an opportunity for other private truckers to come out there and do that work. We'll see how that goes.
Mr. Mayor, just for my information, what was the total monies received from the state? Okay.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the recommendation and ask them to go out for
Motion by Craig, is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll go to a vote. Close the voting. And the motion does pass. Move then to the next agenda item. Yep.
Do we need to do a mic check, Mr. Studio One, and take a small break to check the discrepancy? Would you like to do that?
So now would be a good time for the 5-minute recess.
But it sure works when I touch the side of it. That was me to touch the side of it. I don't think that's ever happened before. Pretty touchy.
Test. Test.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Red Baron Arena and Expo.
Okay. Yeah. It's going in on Friday. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Right. Yeah. If you do it, that's fine. Yep. Great. Thanks. Big one.
Oh, got it. Okay. Wow. Pretty good, 1956. I remember when Hector's was built in 68. Who said that? MnDOT? And you know what we charge is peanuts. And not even the custodial. No, it doesn't. I guarantee it doesn't. It's a token
it's a token rental. Yes.
And that kind of makes other people mad too, that have to pay, when there's some agencies that make it.
There's very few that are free out there. I think.
That's right, but there's more that would say, we'll use it, but we can't pay.
Well, our worst client out there is a tenant, and she's finally getting that with membership. It's been a hard fight.
You have to understand what you do.
Those are old habits. They've been used to how did you find it? Now all of a sudden we find it.
This looks like this was hand typed.
All growing pains. Those are good pains.
No, I don't think so. Preferably a mechanical typewriter. Click, click.
That's the advantage we have right now. And Dawn's been pretty receptive to that. She's a good.
You can explain it and receptive to the explanation.
Then there's equity. Yep.
Yeah.
Just all we gotta do is talk to Lions Club into doing this again. All right. But I guess.
I didn't.
At this time, we'll reconvene the meeting. We are on agenda item number 24. This would be to consider the professional services proposal for evaluation at the Marshall Aquatic Center. So with us tonight is Scott Vandermellen, and he'll present this on behalf of his department and his board.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Hopefully you've had a chance to take a glance at that handout I just provided. I give you that for two reasons. Number one, I was looking for something for when Glenn Olson joined the city, but I think it was a few years after that, Glenn. But I think it's ironic that people always ask me, how old is the pool? And kind of the standard answer has always been 1971. That's kind of always been the standard answer of the main floor, the main pool itself. But I found it interesting reading through those descriptive council minutes there. If you can appreciate how they spell investigative, and one of the things I'll need to work on next week is hiring a matron at the Aquatic Center. But with that being said, before you are two assessment proposals from two separate professional companies. I've been talking to you as a council on and off during work sessions the last couple of years that we would want to take this on. Part of the challenge a year ago was that I couldn't find companies willing to take on our project because there's so much activity out there and there's so much interest in either renovating or building new pools in communities. So up until about December, I only had one company that was interested in providing a proposal. And then kind of at the 11th hour, another company came back who had already told me, hey, Scott, we have too much work on our hands. We couldn't do your project justice. They had a city cancel out, and they were able to submit a proposal. So before you are two different proposals. I feel confident in both companies. Both companies, as you can tell from their information that they provided, have quality reputations. They can provide what we need in terms of an assessment. And let me point out, we're not building a pool from this assessment. We're securing a consulting company to come in and tell us what our needs are. Do we need renovate? Do we need a total rebuild? What does your community want? Does it look different from 10, 11 years ago when your city went through this assessment process? So that's what we're looking for. We want the community to have a voice in that. So as I indicated, there's two proposals before you. I feel comfortable working with either company. Both companies have been on site with staff or their staffs. And we've exchanged information over the last year. So with that, to kind of get the year kicked off. We'd like to get this going in 2019. So with that, I'll answer any questions that you may have.
So just to be specific on your recommendation is for?
292 Design Group.
Okay.
Yes.
Questions for Scott?
You indicated that a study was done 10 or 11 years ago?
Yes, in 2008.
Could you briefly tell us what the recommendations were back then?
I can't speak to all the specifics, obviously not being here, and the council's has changed. I know that Mayor Burns was on the council at the time, but there were recommendations that came out of that assessment for renovations to the existing pool, to the existing structure.
Yeah, I believe there's also some modifications and maybe some addition to the, I'll call it the children's area, the waiting area, with like some additional features that really weren't in the water, but they were like water spraying and things like that. But Scott's right, it was more renovation. It was like, you know, repairing some of the issues with the floor, repairing some of the heaving, repairing some of the concrete, and eliminating some of the leakage.
Yep. So. Yep. That is correct. Some of the things, Councilman Bearcoller, that we'd be looking at now out of this assessment is ADA compliance, addressing some of our space issues in what we refer to as our filter room, kind of our central control room, and Preston could speak more to that specifically. Zero depth entry. You know, Bob talked about some of the water features. A lot of communities are looking at splash pads, adding them either to their existing pool sites or at a separate location. That would come out of this assessment.
And again, you're confident that with, you know, let's say a fairly significant difference in the two bids, that you're going to get essentially the same product out of either one?
Yes, that's a good question, John. That's one of the first things I asked myself when I got the second one back. And actually the 292 Design Group secured an architectural firm to collaborate with, and the individual that's the actual pool builder as part of the 292 Design Group was part of the process 11 years ago when the city went through this. He just runs his own company now called Re-Engineered, and he assured me that everything that we need in every step that the city went through 11 years ago, that they'll maintain. But the thing that I think you have to keep in mind is those families that gave input are different now than they were 11 years ago. You know, they might have had an 8-year-old then, and now they're getting them ready for graduation. So things are different now, but I'm confident that 292 can provide us what we need. And it gives us a little flexibility, John, in terms of having some finances at the end if they come back and give us some alternates in terms of how to finance the project. Do you want a splash pad in your community? That wasn't, you know, something that they probably looked at strongly 11 years ago. So,
and Scott, that's a good point as far as the community engagement, and maybe I know it's in the proposal, but maybe we just detail that a little bit more as far as the target market, the target audience, and getting their input, because that, you know, the target audience, you know, is probably young professionals, young families that have children, not necessarily, you know, us, you know, so
yeah,
even though
Craig's not going to the pool this summer, so he's too busy. So.
There's the kids I've tried to stay away.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, you know, both the demographics and the age of the target market, and really how that would be done through like focus groups or whatever type of community input.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Bob. We'll utilize our advisory board and bring in some folks, and that target audience is going to be that K-8 audience that community services works with on a daily basis. But that's where we would start the process. So.
Other questions?
I noticed in their proposal, they have a number of community centers where they have indoor pools. And certainly in Minnesota with our weather, I mean, the use of the pool depends on the warm weather. And it appears a number of cities have gone to where they have indoor pools so they don't have to worry so much about the weather. I'm wondering with a group like this, will they be offering options and saying, you could, for a certain amount of money, we could do this, and for a different amount of money, we could do something different, so that we could be looking at different options?
Yeah, that's part of the assessment process, and that's a great question. They'll come back with what meets our needs based on what that advisory board tells us, what those search committees look for in terms of a pool. And you're right, a lot of those projects have been done outdoor. I think there's maybe one or two of each one of them that they highlighted outdoor pools, but both entities told me there's still a demand and there's still a need for outdoor pools in rural communities. Where you see those indoor facilities is the metro area, where they have a demand for both, and then they want metered pools indoor to run swim meets and those types of things, because those are seasonal. You know, you want to run your swim practices and your swim meets in the wintertime, and that's not the audience that we're trying to reach. So,
well, my concern is, if we build a new facility, it's going to cost quite a bit of money, and we want to make sure we get as much use out of that facility as we can. And like I say, in Minnesota, it's pretty chancy with regard to the weather and so forth. And I do like it when firms like this will offer different options and say, for this amount of money you can get this, and for that amount of money you can get something different. And it's good to compare options and have options available.
Right.
So.
Other questions for Scott?
Scott, your time frame is a 16-week window.
Yes.
When do you anticipate starting?
I think 292 indicated that they would start the process as soon as possible, if not in late January, first thing in February. And so from a timing standpoint, we'd like to have a recommendation or that assessment report back to council before we open the doors of the pool this summer.
And the only reason I asked that question is that wouldn't that be a good time to ask questions when the pool is open?
I asked both. I
don't know.
Right. I asked both companies that, and they said, you know, if you can bring in the folks that you want to have a voice in that process, we can get you started, and we can lay out all of the examples of what your existing structure does, what it needs, whether it be renovation or rebuild. We can relay all of that out to you. So the challenge is in the summer, you would think that that's when you want to talk to people, but that's the toughest time to track people down. They're either gone on vacation, they drop their kids off at the pool, they go to work, whatever the case might be. So that's the toughest time to get feedback from people.
And is it a possibility that you could do an informal survey, during this 16-week, somehow through the brochure or something or another, that, there's going to be some people that, oh, I didn't know you were seeking input, or they only selected input from a certain selected group. I mean, I think I would like to get, input from as many people as possible. I think 292 probably would too. I'm just going to throw out a crazy idea. Throw a bag stuffer in the Hy-Vee grocery store bags if they'd let you do that. Somebody fill out a survey and send it back to you.
Yeah.
What would you like to see in an improved and an advanced aquatic center? I don't know. I mean,
both entities will take us through that process and how to go through that. And we did solicit some feedback in our needs assessment survey that we did a year and a half ago. So we'll utilize that data too. But 292 will guide us through what kind of surveys and feedback that we want to send out to the community.
Other questions? Glenn?
Is your recommendation primarily based on the cost of the services, and that one is a higher cost than the other one, or did you see a difference in other than cost?
I didn't see any difference in terms of the quality of services that would be provided, and for us to get back the assessment that we're looking for that would provide us quality information. I think both firms were committed to coming to Marshall and providing information for us. Obviously, as I said earlier, the lower cost proposal allows us some flexibility if there's some alternates at the end that we need to add on. Say they want to take us through a financing process, in terms of maybe going to a public vote or something of that nature.
The other question I have is that it does indicate additional architectural services are available if required.
Yep.
Architect $90 to $120 an hour, and principal $140 to $175 an hour. Do we have any idea as to what we think the additional cost might be for those types of services? I mean, could it be a substantial amount of money that in addition to what we're approving here?
I think until you get your assessment back and know what your needs are, that would be hard to estimate.
I'm just, you know, you'd hate to see something like this, all of a sudden it doubles in the cost, what you think you're going to pay, and all of a sudden you're paying a whole lot more than that. And
right.
You're right, you don't always know what you're going to get into and what you need and what kind of services you're going to need.
Right.
But, you know, my concern would be, you know, to keep the overall cost down and not spend too much money on this project. And so if it goes forward, then the staff then determine how much additional services are required, and is this ever going to come back to the council again for any more approval? Or
we would absolutely bring it back to you.
If the amount is substantially different than what is shown here.
Yep.
Any other questions for Scott?
Mr. Mayor, just a question regarding Mr. Bierkohler's question. Could that be a possibility of our motion that the expenditure not exceed $21,000?
Certainly be part of the motion.
Because that's part, you know, we got 19.1 and an additional $1,200, so roughly, you know, $21,000, and not to exceed that amount, our motion could be not to exceed $21,000, and if it does, it comes back before the council.
If that's included in the motion that's made.
And I would like to make that motion that we engage 292 Design Group, but not to exceed $21,000 at this point.
I'd second that.
Motion by Russ, seconded by Steve.
20,300.
It's actually
Oh,
20,000.
21,000 is perfect, yep.
I just rounded it up. Yeah. Give them a little flexibility there, $21,000. Are you comfortable with that, Scott?
Sure.
Okay.
Other discussion on the motion? And Kyle, you have the updated motion. Are we ready to move to a vote? We'll move to a vote.
Thanks, Scott.
We'll close the voting. And the motion does pass. Move then to agenda item number 25. This is consider the approval of resolutions accepting the donations for the Parks Department. Preston, you want to speak to this? Preston Stentrude from our Parks Department.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The resolutions in front of you would just be from donations made from several different entities, and then one kind of personal donation through 2018. Just to give you guys a little background, probably are all aware already, but the donations from ABA and the Baseball Association went to regrading the infield at Legion Field, which was 15 years overdue probably. So we basically cut all the sod off the whole infield, laser leveled the whole thing. It's the exact slope recommended by design layout, 0.5% slope in all directions. It's going to improve drainage, playability, and then of course safety for players. We were actually to the point where some teams were saying if we don't do something, they weren't coming back for any tournaments and stuff. So, those went to that. The 675 is for a bench at Independence Park for the horseshoe courts. Ralph Oren was a avid member of the Horseshoe Club, and their family wanted to donate a bench to put there, so that'll go in this spring. And then the Kiwanis Club is for the playground at Legion Field, which that's actually a 2019 donation. I figured I was working on it, I'd get them all in. So just want to thank everyone that considers doing the donation for the Parks Department and helps us do stuff that we maybe wouldn't be able to otherwise.
And thank you, Preston. Certainly, we're grateful for the generosity of the donors, both the individuals as well as the groups, and also really appreciate their investment in the
Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion to approve the acceptance and appreciation for the donations.
Motion by Craig.
Second.
Seconded by Steve.
Thank you.
To approve in all three resolutions as part of this motion.
Mr. Mayor, just one question. Preston, is there going to be some kind of a plaque put on that bench? I mean, it would be nice to have the family or him recognized with a plaque or something.
Yep, they were still actually considering it. They're gonna either do a plaque on the bench or have somebody like
Something, yeah, pretty hard
made
to
to
do
put in
something
the
on a-
concrete that we put on the bench, but they're gonna cover the cost and just have us put it on, so.
Preston, so as far as the $675, we're pretty sure that's what the bench is going to cost.
Yep, we already have it, I have it in hand, and we billed them the exact cost, so.
Okay.
Any other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting. The motion passes.
Mr. Mayor, you didn't make it in.
Enter manually, thank you. Still passed.
Yeah, I guess.
He's just giving up on you. We'll work on
The
it.
pro
next
tem
time.
is not taking over that quick. He's gonna stay here. That's okay. We'll forgive him.
Kyle, you didn't get paid extra for corrections either. by the way. That's all inclusive.
Okay, so, get back to my place here. So we are on agenda item number 27, which is a tax abatement policy. This was discussed at previous meetings. We have the final draft that has been considered and recommended by EDA to consider this evening. Tara Onken, EDA Director, once again is with us. Tara?
Thank you again for allowing me to come back and share with you our final draft of this. This started back in early November when a hotel developer came here and was asking for some tax abatement on a specific project, which then sparked a greater conversation among council and the community on perhaps implementing a tax abatement policy for business. So the council at that time recommended that we start to draft an abatement policy. We did that. We brought it through EDA. The EDA sort of vetted and discussed at that level what they would like to see done with regards to an overall abatement policy versus just targeting a hotel or a specific industry. So then that request was brought forward, or a recommendation was brought forward to council. And basically, you guys, I think it was in late November, then again turned it back to staff and agreed to basically encourage us to draft an abatement policy that covered all of the business or industry. So what we did internally is we went ahead and updated a draft. We looked at many examples from many other communities, and we met internally with Sharon, Annette from Finance, Dave Parsons. So we've had multiple meetings really looking at all of the details that are involved with the policy. This policy would open it up to all businesses or commercial industry, and it refers to state statute throughout, so it's not anything new or outside of the box. It's generic enough but yet specific enough, referring back to state policy. And then each request would still be reviewed on a case-by-case basis, so this is the overall policy that sort of sets the framework, but any request that comes forward would still be vetted through EDA and through City Council before any abatement is granted, somewhat similar to the process that we have in place with the single-family housing abatement. So with that, I guess I would open it up for any questions or feedback on what was included in the draft policy.
Sharon, do you have anything to add at this time?
I just want to add that I think it's fairly common for most cities to have a general tax abatement policy, even though the statute allows most of the provisions that are in here. And I think it's good practice to have something written in black and white that the EDA can refer to business owners in terms of this policy. And I know that throughout, as Tara mentioned, the part about if a tax abatement would go forward, we work with them on a development agreement coinciding with the business subsidy tax as well. And I think that this policy puts provisions in there where it still means that the city would have some decisions to make on who would get an abatement and who would not. So it's a little bit different than the home tax abatement where there it's pretty clear cut. Here we'd have to do some analysis, and we'd also want to put some potential requirements into the abatement, essentially because the abatement's likely going to have a larger, there'll be a larger abatement in terms of financial dollars, and we would want to make sure that we have a return on that investment. So I just wanted to add that as in addition to what Tara stated.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
I have just for, before my question, your second paragraph, there's a typo right on the top, development as they get changed, not thought get changed. Second line down. See that second paragraph underneath? General, I can show you.
Okay.
The question is, how did we come about on a no period longer than 15 years?
That's governed by statute. So if a request came forward, you could say, we want for this project, for this many jobs, for this building, we want it no longer than 2 years. The 15 years is just referencing state statute.
So then that also makes reference to the abatement for, we could increase it to 20 years, based upon state statute.
Yes, yes.
I think the only reason I asked that question is that, and again, when the hotel came forth back whenever, I remember, I don't remember if it was exactly 2 years, 3 years, or 7 years.
7 years.
But I agree with Administrator Hanson. I mean, if we abate some commercial property for 10 or 15 years, that, or maybe even 20 years, that could be a significant dollar loss.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad that maybe that we've got that in there. I'm still not happy with the 15 years, but the state statute, there's nothing we can do about that.
That's the maximum amount allowed by state statute, so that's why it's referenced. But again, if a project comes forward and it only needs 2 years, 7 years, 10 years, or 1 year, then that would be up to the council at that time. Yep, absolutely.
Any other questions?
One of the things, Mr. Mayor, that I think this is important, and there was a lot of discussion of this at the EDA, and with recent developments in the newspaper with True Shrimp, Minnesota's getting its butt handed to them, basically, with taxes, and so we want to encourage businesses to come in. And the line of how much of a give do you give to entice them in versus, you know, you're giving them too much and they're getting a lot and not giving back to the city, that becomes that fine line. And I think, you know, you have to balance job creation, which is why, Russ, I think if we got a big company in with lots and lots, you could extend it because there'd be that many more employees that are living, paying taxes, et cetera, et cetera. Smaller companies, there's flexibility. So that was where the EDA came out too. And there was a lot of discussion.
And also, let's remember, it doesn't have to be 100% abatement every year. I mean, it can be a graduated schedule,
Yep.
180, 60,
Sliding
40,
scale.
20,
Sliding scale.
something like that.
Right.
So, yeah.
One of the benefits.
That gives the flexibility to.
Sorry. One of the benefits of extending or having a longer period of time is because they have to meet certain requirements, typically in job growth and wages, we're extending the time they have to meet these requirements. Once the abatement's gone, then those jobs, wages, technically under the abatement agreement wouldn't have to be met. So there is a benefit in certain cases to having a longer term agreement if you wanted to see that those requirements of job growth and wages, and it could be other parameters that you would want to put in the abatement agreement or development agreement as part of that as well.
Other questions? Thank you, Tara, for your work on this. I would entertain a motion.
I would make a motion to approve the authorization.
I would second that.
Motion by John, seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote.
Did you vote, Bob?
I did. Okay. Yes, we'll close the vote. So that motion does,
Greg didn't vote.
Yes, I did. You was there, I did. Well, open it up again.
so let's
Man,
vote.
it's killing me. Here, let me do it again.
Revote.
We have to revote, Kyle?
Yeah,
Because of,
it's hard to find good help. Killing me.
okay. Everybody in?
I'm in.
Now we'll close the vote. And the motion does pass. So agenda item number 28 is consider the change order authorization process change. This background on this is we asked staff to evaluate the process that change orders were brought forward to maybe streamline the process, maybe deal with some things that should be dealt with more efficiently, but also utilize the contingency amount in that contract as a guide. So I believe with that, then Glenn and Sharon and others did a substantial amount of work. Glenn, I'll turn to you first.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. You can see, if you read through the background of the process, it kind of lays out kind of the justification for what we're recommending. And I think with that being said, I'm going to jump right to the recommendation. And you can see them, it's 4 significant items that address projects of all sizes from small to large. And the intent is to fall within the contingency listed for each individual project, except for the very small ones. And most of our change orders on small projects involve requests from private property owners or in some cases businesses to expand the nature of the project, and are done so by their acceptance of the additional cost. But it still has to go to council for approval of the change order. I did take a look at what our existing construction contracts allows, and that's for the engineer to be responsible for doing that work within the contingency period, and it's located in 2 parts of the standard specifications. So if you have any questions, it's fairly simple. The recommendation does not talk about dollar amounts except for the small projects. And we did take a look at the last 10 years worth of projects and change orders, and they all fell within that except for those very small projects. So if you have any questions, one of us could certainly address it.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. We'll open up for questions.
I have one. So Glenn, in the paperwork that you gave us in our packets, it said and I'll quote, for projects up to 100,000, change orders vary widely from -3%, meaning we're saving money, to 45% over.
Mm-hmm.
Now, would you consider 100,000 a small project?
Yes.
See, I don't. I think
because we go up to
$100,000 is
$2 million.
I know,
and more than that. Like today's discussion, one of them was for $8 million, and the other one was for $3.1 million. Those are really significant, and the dollar amounts that we include in that are representative of the total construction cost. And that's what our construction specifications really do authorize, up to that contingency amount. Now, for the smaller projects, and most of those are, I'll say, $50,000 to $100,000, those are relatively small construction projects. If you remember seeing in our presentation on that building, you can't build a steel cold storage shed for under $130,000. So it's kind of relative in scope, but that's the cost of projects. And we use the $25,000 figure as a recommendation because you already have that in our purchasing policy, that the administrator and staff is able to approve contracts up to that amount. So that's why we use the $25,000. I do intend also, if you saw in the background, that I think you guys should be aware of what's going on. So I would like to put any change orders that we process, if you go with this scope of work, in the informational items in the council agendas, so that if you have any questions about any specific one, you can either come and ask me away from this meeting or ask it at a public meeting. And then I would like council to approve the final change order as well as the authorization for final payment. That's required in some projects, not in all, but that's required in many projects, especially like special assessment projects. So I think that's important, that when you come to the final, whether it's plus or minus, and we've had some minus ones, not a lot, but we've had some minus ones. I think that that should be full council action on the final reconciling change order and final payment. So that's why I don't think that $25,000 and $100,000 project, yeah, it's a big project, but it's not very big when it comes to construction projects. Like I said, you can't build a shed for that.
Other questions?
You would probably agree with this, that if this policy is approved, that these projects will not have the same oversight by council members that they currently have.
I would disagree with that. I believe that council oversight is necessary, and you have that ability if, in fact, they're all included in the informational items in your council packet. Okay, and that gives you the opportunity to come and see me or to bring it up at a formal meeting.
I think you would agree that if it's in the agenda as an agenda item, it's more likely to be reviewed and looked at by council members than if it's put into informational items.
That's completely up to you. Yeah.
Sharon?
So just to give some perspective, the 45%, the actual change order, the amount was like $33,800. So, you know, when you
final,
the percentage could mean a very small amount. So I just wanted to clarify that as well. And I do think you know, when we look at Saratoga, was that 2 million, over 2 million? These are some very large projects, and it doesn't take long to get to the point where some of the change orders that we're looking at is very, very minor. One of the things that came into consideration in addition to the purchasing policy was, you know, even the contract bidding laws for the state of Minnesota has changed. You know, it's incrementally has gone up over the years. The latest change, I think, happened in 2017, where the bidding contracting laws went from 100,000 to 175,000. So we do kind of have to look at the cost of the projects. And you know, the other perspective too is that change orders are common. They're not uncommon. If you look across the state of Minnesota in any municipality, these are things that happen in the construction season on a regular basis. In some cases, and I know this factually, for some of the contractors, there's hesitancy with the city of Marshall. The hesitancy is the city of Marshall going to pay for change orders or not? And some contractors may not bid on a project based on our philosophy on change orders. And the difficulty for staff is, can we move forward with projects? It creates delays, inefficiency, and so forth. So that's just kind of the perspective. There was a suggestion by a council member to look at change order policy. We're within contract for the 5%. Majority of the cases in it, the cases where they're not, we did look at, you know, what amount should have the look for the city council. And, you know, I think I certainly understand the perspective of looking at the change orders, and I know that we've had some projects maybe recently that there was a number of change orders. This is prior to me coming on with the city. And so I think it's heightened a little bit of the look at the change orders. But just looking at some of the actual numbers, and if you look at overall efficiency and competitive bidding and so forth, I think this puts the city of Marshall in a stronger position rather than a weaker position. And you actually might save some money if we implement the change order policy. The money's going to be efficiency and staff, and we might get more competitive bidding from contractors who may look at us and say, looks like we're moving in the right direction.
Mr. Mayor?
I just want to add to that.
Greg?
Thanks, Sharon. And kind of on that line too, it's always troubled me because in order for the projects to move forward, and I know the questions come up, and I know a number of times we approve change orders that have already been, the work's been done. And then the question comes up is, well, by council, would if we don't approve this? And I think that goes right with what Sharon's talking about. As a contractor, I don't want to do $30,000 worth of additional work on a $2.2 million project and then wonder if I'm going to get paid for it. And we expect these projects to continue. There's contingencies. If we delay a project 2 weeks waiting on the council to approve a change order, and then that contractor falls behind schedule, who pays that penalty? Do we pay the penalty to the contractor? We probably should. We stalled the project. This is good business management. That's why we hire professionals to do the city's business on a day-to-day basis. We don't lose the ability to review it, and I think we need to trust our people to do our work. And we get to evaluate them in their performance review if we don't think they're doing a good job. But I think we've got to let them do that job. We expect them to manage the day-to-day city business. And I think we need to let this go forward.
Other input?
Since I'm the rookie, I just have to clear in my own mind. Hypothetical, you have a $2 million project and you've got 10 change orders that exceed, combined, individually they don't exceed the 5% contingency, but combined they do. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Would you still
It
have
would be the combination.
Would you have to come before council then because they've exceeded that all at different times, these change orders?
Yes.
So you've approved them because
Up
they're
to that
underneath the
point.
5%.
Up to that point, and before we reach the 5% of the $2 million, we would be coming to you and they say, we probably expect $30,000 more of change orders.
So you're saying total change orders, not individual?
Not individual.
Okay, all right. Just so, I can use that rookie thing for a couple of months, can't I?
Yeah, it'll run out quick.
Good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. Any other thoughts? If not,
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move approval of the change order authorization.
motion by Craig, is there a second to that motion?
I will second that.
Seconded by John. Discussion on that motion. If not, we'll move to a vote.
I better hit submit, huh?
Yeah.
There.
Everyone voted? We'll close voting.
No, that's all right.
And the motion does not pass because there's 3 in favor and 3 opposed. Do you want any further discussion, or if not, you have the results of that tally. So we will then move forward to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 29, the Marguerite Avenue, South Bend Avenue reconstruction project. We have a change order to consider, actually 2. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. There are a couple of items there. The change order was for a tree removal, and that did be first. And the second one is the reconciling change order that reduces the total project cost. Recommend approval.
Questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
So move.
I'll second.
Motion by Russ, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close voting. The motion passes.
Mr. Mayor?
Are you going to vote?
I thought it said it's accepted, but I don't know what happened. I'm voting, yeah. Mine's yes.
Mr. Mayor, just a question on that. So Glenn, on that change order that we all just approved, that's already been done, right?
Correct.
Okay, that's been my point on the previous vote. That's really frustrating.
Then the next one, action then would be the same project. This is the final change order as well as the acknowledgement of the final pay request. As Glenn
Recommend
explained, this is
approval.
the compilation of all of the
Pluses and minuses.
Yep.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Russ, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Craig. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the vote. Motion passes. We'll move then to agenda item number 30, Commission Board Liaison Reports. Actually, Regional Development Commission will meet Thursday evening, and the Fire Relief Association will have their annual meeting next Tuesday evening. Craig?
None, Mr. Mayor.
Steve?
Likewise.
Glenn?
Planning Commission meets tomorrow, and Housing Commission meets on Monday.
John?
None. The MMU meets next week as well as EDA.
And Russ, you're off the hook for tonight.
Leave all mine, meet next week.
So then we'll move then to agenda item number 31, Councilmember individual items. Craig, let's start at your end.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a kind of a quick note, and this is something that I've participated in every year that they've run it, and you all may have gotten the same email regarding the upcoming coyote hunting tournament. Okay?
I have received emails.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I did draft a reply and then very wisely just deleted it and vented my frustration to my loving bride. I will say that it's kind of sad to me that someone who is obviously concerned, and I totally respect that, and if the hunt actually took place the way that it was described in the email, I would join in with the protest of that hunt. But that's not at all what it is. And so I think it's a good thing for Marshall and the Southwest Minnesota hunting community that the group that puts that on and promotes it does a good job. It's a very high class. The coyotes definitely get a fair chase. The only thing that could do better is if we put strobes on the hunters so they knew exactly where we were. But other than that, I just want to say that I feel bad that someone takes that much work into putting a project or a presentation together that's that ill-informed and does that poor of a job of representing what's happening. And I want to thank the people that put it on, and I think that as a community, we should totally support that type of involvement. Maybe not specifically the sport, but that type of community engagement and involvement. So that's all I have. Thank you.
My comment, and I shared with City Administrator Hansen, I think that it's incumbent upon us to remind our citizens to make sure that they plow their sidewalks. My wife's an avid runner. I actually tried to walk home the other day, and I had to go two things. I had to go about 30 feet into the road because it was still sloppy into the road. And then when I was on the sidewalks, I can't tell you how many places, churches, private residences, were not plowed, and it was really tough. It makes for unsafe. And then I think it'd be nice to have Preston and the street department look at some kind of a better way to keep the parks. The park sidewalk was great by Independence, but because of the freeze thaw, it got a lot of ice on it. And I don't know if there's a better way to protect that, because there's a ton of people who still use that and go all around. And so it'd be nice to be able to do it without fear of slipping and breaking your hip and coming to see me. Not that I mind that, but.
Okay. Anything else, Steve?
Yeah, that's it.
Glenn?
I have nothing.
Russ?
Just to piggyback on what Councilman Meister said, I walk on the sidewalks as well too, but the other thing is that because of the plows going by, and believe me, they all did a great job, but we all know that the snow has now turned to ice and almost concrete along the curb, and there are a lot of fire hydrants that are not accessible. So if possible, city staff, and maybe if they've got time, Park and Rec or somebody would go around with, you know, a skid loader or something and just kind of open up that area in front of a water hydrant, I think fire hydrant, it would speed up immensely. God forbid there's a fire in front of your house, that the firemen don't have to shovel their way through that, because it is concrete. I usually try and take care of the one down on the end of my block, and I even took a steel or aluminum scoop shovel down there, and I can't even break it apart right now. So it's almost like concrete. So, and I know there's not a lot of them, but I know that when the plows come around the corner, that snow is all right there, and sometimes there's a hydrant right there. So just a kind of a point of reference if city staff or city, you know, street department or somebody goes sees it, it'd be nice just to open them up a little bit. That's all I have.
On that note too, and I'll jump out of order back to you, but there was a nice social media message about reminding property owners to, if they have a hydrant on their property, like I do, you know, it's best if the homeowner takes care of it. I know I do that, and if I'm not around, one of my neighbors does, so.
And I think the important thing on that too, because it is tough, especially now with the warm weather, the nice warm weather we've had, all those snowplow furrows are rock hard. And so the homeowners will typically blow them from the resident side in and not necessarily the street side. So that might be an option to help them out too, but I think that's a really good message.
Even if they break that initial
Crust.
right there, then we as a homeowner could go out and finish the rest if possible. So. But again, the city staff has done a great job, and one other thing I'd like to do is also thank the city staff for being patient with me, especially Kyle, Sharon, and everybody else being the rookie on this group, and I'm going to use that for longer than what these guys tell me. But
No, you're almost done already.
So you gotta have 8 o'clock, you have to use it.
But again, I can't thank city staff enough for being more than patient with me during this transition.
Thank you, Russ. John?
I guess one of the items in reviewing the administrator's report, detective report actually, is really disappointing to see is the dollar amount of some of the scamming that went on in this community. It's really sad to see that people are being taken for those kind of dollar amounts. I know there isn't anything the city can do on it other than just try to bring an awareness out there if somebody's calling and asking for gift cards or saying, oh, your grandchild's in jail or whatever crazy scam they come up with. Don't be afraid to call somebody and ask a question. Is it really? Don't be embarrassed about it. There's a lot of dollars that went out of this community on account of those scams, and we probably only are seeing a small amount of it. It's really, disappointing that people do that for a living, but just try to bring some awareness out there. Maybe see if the media can throw in a little bit something sometime, and if there's a question on scamming, just call somebody and ask. It's well worth it rather than turning over a bunch of money.
Can I just add something?
Go ahead.
One thing, Ways and Means Committee did meet regarding special assessments, and we are continuing to address that issue, and hopefully we'll get it resolved fairly soon. So the community should know that we are continuing to work on that. And the other thing I was going to mention is that there was concerns in the mobile home park about snow removal and whether, people that have medical conditions and whether to be able to get to the hospital if they needed to. And I don't know if you want to talk about that or not, but.
Sure. We would always respond to an emergency situation, whether it's privately or publicly dedicated roadway. So if in fact there was a request made, any of us, parks or streets or wastewater, would be responding to get that open immediately. But generally we would want that request to come from PD. Okay, so they need to call 911 for the emergency, and they will dispatch whatever's necessary to get that job done, whether it's fire, ambulance, other emergency services. But we don't want anyone calling for services.
And so the public over there should know that if they need help, help's available.
Yep.
Okay, John, anything else? So I have a couple of things. Sharon, if you could bring that up a little bit so I can read it. But the first off, let me say noon today the legislature convened, and there's obviously a number of opportunities to kind of represent some things that are important for the community. So I think you all have that information. If people are available to go to events like the upcoming Coalition Greater Minnesota Cities, which we're a member of, they have their legislative day, I believe it's January 30th. The League of Minnesota Cities has their day. There's a transportation day. So there's some opportunities. I know, it's tough for people to, take a lot of time there, but if you have interest in it, and if you have some time available, those are well organized and I think are appreciated. So every year I do kind of a list of top 10, and some years I, just talk about them here, and then, but in this year, so it gets in the minutes, I actually wrote it out, at least what the titles were. And some of these, as Glenn, you alluded to, are really continuation. So City Hall Building Committee is a continuation. The Commercial and Industrial Street Assessment Policy is something that, is a work in progress. The rental code ordinance has been a discussion item, especially related to, as we talk about Broadmoor Valley, or if we, in some of the questions there, or if we talk about some of the questions that we had this fall about the former Trident property and closure, there was additional discussion about rental code ordinance, and that's a very broad and complex topic, but that may be one that the legislative ordinance, the under 21 access to tobacco, I mentioned that because there are 28 cities that have adopted that. At least maybe we should consider, should this be considered in the city of Marshall or not? So it's really a question to consider, not something that, this has to be done, but it's probably a question that other communities are considering in Minnesota, and probably Marshall is probably one of those communities that should have that discussion. The upcoming Census Complete Count Committee, I know Kyle's giving some leadership to Complete Count Committee, and it seems like, this is, the beginning of 2019, and the census isn't going to occur until April 1st on 2020, but now is really when the time would happen, so that all of those, especially likely to be undercounted individuals and populations, that we can, provide some outreach, some education, so that they are counted. I remember in the 1990 census, we felt that we had a severe undercount, but then once the census is done, even though we had a undercount that was probably 2,000 people, it's really tough to correct it. So, and then talking about things in the future, and again, this is a ways off, but it is coming up, is the 150th anniversary of the city of Marshall. And quite honestly, that discussion probably needs to start this year or next year about, how the city is going to celebrate its 150th anniversary. We had a community leadership program a few years ago that was really led by the Chamber of Commerce, and I think there is need for reestablishment of that leadership program for really two reasons. One is to develop leaders, but then also to engage some of our young professionals, younger newcomers to the community, because if they become involved in the community and become involved in some leadership, be it in their civic organization or church, or perhaps on a board or commission, I think they're more likely to become engaged in the community and less likely to relocate. And next, I listed strengthen the accountability and outcome objectives with the Chamber of Commerce, with the partnerships that we have. We have two major partnerships. One is the Economic Development Authority and the administration, and the other is the Convention and Visitors Bureau. I think both of those we probably want to give attention to, given that we have that relationship. That relationship has public dollars that are invested, and we also have employees that are employed by those private sectors. So that relationship probably needs some nurturing. And then finally, our healthy community goals, including, what, somewhat gets overlooked, but our bike-friendly community designation, it gets overlooked because, of course, it happened in December, and, that's not a good time for biking. But I think, having a community that promotes healthy environment is just good for the community. So those are the items that I would list on mine. I don't think I missed anything up there. Oh, did I? Oh, the Diversity, Inclusion, and Workforce Development Council. We don't really have a group that really is championing that, and so as we work perhaps with the Chamber of Commerce, perhaps with the Personnel Association, I think we have some opportunities there. So with that, that's what I've been thinking of this January 2019. With that, I'll move us then to staff reports, starting with Sharon.
Mr. Mayor and Council, just to update on City Hall, we are scheduled to meet as a committee on January 23rd, and Russ, now that that's a committee that Councilman Sturr was on. I don't know if that was listed, but I will connect with you on that and some other items. Yeah, I'll send you an email. That doesn't work for me for some odd reason, but that particular project did get bogged down a little bit in 2018. We're still working on a potential cooperation item related to City Hall, and we'll see how that goes forward. And scheduling has been somewhat of a challenge and has delayed it a little bit, but we hope to really move forward here in 2019 at a much faster pace than in 2018. So just for knowledge on the council's part. And then I do want to just comment a little bit about the building inspection department. One of the things that we talked about early last year was gaining trust and communicating and educating. And, part of integrity is saying you're going to do something and doing it. And one of the things that the building inspection department did recently, which is issuing a department newsletter to contractors, that was recently mailed or emailed to the contractor list, and we did get some really good positive feedback on that. So I do want to thank Jason and Elia and Ray and Curtis who put together the newsletter, and I'm going to actually hand that out so you have a chance to look at that. It is on our website as well. And then also one of the items that I think was briefly discussed when we talked about building codes, but you may not see kind of the back work on it, is that in January, there's an ISO rating for insurance costs, and the letter kind of describes why it's important to have building code enforcement and how that relates to the cost of insurance. And we have a pretty good rating in Marshall. It actually could be possibly improved with a rental code ordinance and more involvement with the fire department related type inspections. But I'll hand that out to the council as well, just so you have a little more background information on that relationship between how much a resident pays for insurance and how they come about with that particular rating. So I'll pass that on. And that's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Question for Sharon? Glenn?
Just a couple of items. The fire hydrant cleaning, will be in contact with the MMU too about responsibilities for that. Generally, it's the property owner, but if there's emergency needs for that, sometimes they do that. Also, we have an issue with crosswalk areas, and the corner occupant, the corner owner, is responsible for the clearing of the crosswalk area as well. The sidewalk in front of their place, all the way up to the street. And we have several locations around the city where the street department has come by, pushed the snow to the side, just like they do everywhere, but that crosswalk is completely plugged. It's still the responsibility of the property owner to remove that, unless there's a direction to change that. So it's really tough right now because of the ice and melting. So that's something that we're going to have to address, and what's the real remedy for that. If it was light fluffy snow, most property owners wouldn't have a problem doing it. As a reminder, we do sidewalks on a complaint basis. So we don't drive around looking for problems, but we do address every complaint that's issued to us. So if you have any, we want specific locations, and we actually will go out and do it without notification. And some property owners don't understand that. How come you didn't call me? Well, the process is after any 2-inch snow, you have to get rid of it, and you're really responsible for ice removal as well. So I sympathize with the walkers and runners that want to use the sidewalks but can't. My family is big walkers, and it's almost impossible to walk safely because of what's happened. So I'll get off of that, but I would like to be able to use social media a little bit more too for identifying, even though the policy says after 2 inches of snow, we're out and moving stuff, how come they don't? Okay, maybe some way of notifying people that, maybe I wasn't a resident here last year. Maybe I'm a new student. Maybe I don't know what the policy is. And I sure pay attention to my phone. And so how do we get that? We can put it as a liner on the bottom of Studio One, but that doesn't get out to everybody either. We'd like to get it out to as many people as possible and explain why we done what we asked to do. So snow removal is a tough thing, especially when we come by and we clean the streets and fill the sidewalk or fill the crosswalk, but it's up to the property owner to clear it out too. It's kind of too bad in the school zone areas. The intersection of C Street and Main Street kind of bothers me one of the most. It's a main area and doesn't get cleared. Okay, so I'll get off my soapbox. That's all I've got.
So a question on that though, Glenn. I mean, if you guys see it in an area like that that's problematic, as an individual council member in my ward, I would have no problem with the city seeing that and reacting to it as if it was complaint. Consider me the complainant. I just, some of those, I think that I understand a lot of the kind of the closer in, the more remote neighborhood areas that's kind of complaint driven, but on some of these major pieces, I have no problem with the city engaging on something that's been 24 to 48 hours and there's no activity and there's a history of no activity. Go in there and consider one of us the complainant. I just think we need to address those. I think we need to be more proactive.
And we charge for that. Just
yes, absolutely. Yeah, and we approve those if they don't get paid, to go on the assessment, on the taxes. I just think that we need to, especially now, this has been a tough year because we got all that snow, it was warm, it was wet, as soon as you step on it, it was ice, and now we've had this where it's really ice, it's steel ice. And I just think that, I'm okay with our departments being more proactive on that.
Just to echo what Craig said, and again, I know community services and the dead end down where I live, there was 2 city trucks and a loader down there taking the snow out of that dead end. And again, they could very easily push a hydrant or a crosswalk or something when they're down there. When they're going, if they see something plugged, I would try and open it up. I mean.
And
I
Sharon.
don't mean to keep adding to this, but I do a lot of walking and running too. And winter is an inconvenience, and it's, you end up on a treadmill and you don't really want to be on a treadmill, or maybe you don't have one. I recommend cleats for ice that you can put on, I'm serious, that you can put on your shoes. Yeah. And I mean, it does help. And I do think it's just the nature of the climate and where we're at with the freezing and thawing. It's a battle unless you're going to have raised sidewalks and there's no drainage on them. It's, I don't know, but winter is an inconvenience, and that's a lot of this discussion. It's not the way we want it because of other factors. So I just want to throw that out there.
Okay, Dennis?
I can't follow up snow complaints.
So you have the remainder of the items. Agenda item number 35 is the administrative reports for your review. 36 is the information items, including the building permits. 37 is the listing of upcoming meetings, which brings us to agenda item number 38.
I so move.
I would second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Steve to adjourn. Any discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote.
Everybody make sure you get in on this.
We'll close the voting, and that passed. We're adjourned.